Sachi Burgi Juji Medo Tam Rira Linjin Yende Gemba Dia Sangye Jing Du Mite Wagi Dogu Nanda Jing Ajuba Jo Idam Guru Rana Mandala Gane Yadayami Sangye Judong Tsugi Jonam La Jaju Badu Dani Gazu Ji Dagi Junyen Gebe Sunangi Dola Benji Sangye Duba Sho Sangye Judong Tsugi Jonam La Jaju Badu Dani Gazu Ji Dagi Juji Gebe Sunangi Dola Benji Sangye Duba Sho Sangye Judong Tsugi Jonam La Jaju Badu Dani Gazu Ji Dagi Juji Gebe Sunangi Dola Benji Sangye Duba Sho. All right, so I'll go to the English. Huh, there it is. And just a little bit of review to bring us up to where we are. We had stopped, I think I had glossed verse 24, but it started on verse 25. But just to give you a sense, Nagarjuna has been talking about the realist schools, which are among a general category of, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kaya, but it's a general um, category called Ngompomawa, which is those who advocate existence, things exist. And basically, that's every school system under Prasangika Madhyamaka. But among those who advocate for existence, things that exist, are Vaibhashikas, the realists, Sautantrikas, those who follow sutras, um, Chittamanti, mind only, and Svatantric Madhyamakas. Um, so Nagarjuna, when he wrote this, there was not a Chittamantra school. There was no Yogacharya yet. It hadn't appeared in India. That wasn't until Asanga taught his five texts that he got from Maitreya. And then the Madhyamaka had yet to appear as well. And that didn't appear until Buddha Palita wrote his text. And so in his commentary here on his 60 verses, Nagarjuna is not refuting either of those schools. Later followers of Nagarjuna and Chandakirti and Buddha Palita, like Tsongkhapa, very famously Tsongkhapa, did, however, refute certain tenets of the mind-only school and the lower division of Madhyamaka. So, however, in his commentary to this text, um, Yumi Katsurabashe did get into those other school systems a little bit and how things apply to them. So basically, up to now, the debate is between the realist sutra followers and Nagarjuna. And one of the debates is if things do not have self nature, then you're refuting the Four Noble Truths. And of course, Nagarjuna comes back and says, within emptiness, all things are possible. Without emptiness, nothing is possible. And so by asserting self-existent phenomena, you, realist and Sautantric schools, are refuting the Four Noble Truths, not me. Um, and so that's where the debate has been. So here, I'll just read verse 23. Those who develop understanding of profound relativity, relativity, as I said, is how this translator has decided to translate Tendal 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 Junwa, um, and I think a better translation of that term is dependent origination. It has the sense of relativity, but I think relativity leaves out the part of Tyndall that talks about dependent arising, effects arising from um, conditions and causes, non-self-existent conditions and causes. So those who develop understanding of profound dependent origination, I'll insert, abandoning creation and destruction, cross the ocean of existence with its views. And so it's only Nagarjuna's assertion here is that you cannot cross the ocean of cyclic existence if you're holding on to tenets or viewpoints of existence and non-existence. So if you have any um, clutching at the pearls of self-existence, right? Then by that very notion, you're clutching to the view that certain phenomena don't exist, right? And so for the followers of the lower schools, their idea of nirvana was the elimination of the aggregates, the extinguishing of the aggregates. And Nagarjuna's rebuttal point to them is no, you can't, you cannot um, destroy them and find nirvana that way. You're just hurting your aggregates, right? Um, in fact, that very notion that they have a self-existent nature and you're going to destroy them and you'll go into non-existence, that's a fallacious view. That's an extreme of existence and non-existence. And it's only by understanding how things arise without depending on self-nature that you actually will be able to eliminate the causes for your cyclic existence and the pain of it. So the next verse that we went over last time, alienated beings who hold self as real mistake existence and non-existence. Thus flawed, they are driven by addictions and and hence are deceived by their own minds. So that's pretty much where we left off. I'll pull up the Tibetan because again, I do prefer um, uh, like that last verse 23. Gandak Tenching Del Junwa, right? So that's dependent arising. Whoever um, sees ten as dependent, Jingdrawar is a relationship with dependence, like in relationship to dependence. Junwa is arising. Things arise in dependence, right? So whoever dependent origination who sees that, Ke birth, Dong Jikpa, destruction, Nangpangbar, they've thoroughly abandoned notions of self-existent birth and destruction. Shepa by fully understanding that, Dadak, those beings, Dargyur, Sipe, Gyatso, Gel, they abandon or they cross the vast ocean of views of existence. And so that was that verse that we just went over. And the one that we just got to, um, Soso Keo is any being who has yet to see to get to the path of seeing or beyond. So that's us ordinary beings. or alien. It was translated by the translator as alienated beings, which is not wrong. Um, um, the word alienate or isolation has different meanings in this text, so you got to be careful with how you translate it. But soso kewa are beings who are born in many diverse ways. Um, Ngu, the word here, ngu, that's the first part of the word ngumpo, ngumpo mawa, those who advocate for existence, um, produced things. Ngu dak chen, ngu dak in this place has a philosophical meaning. Ngu is how the Tibetan translators um, translated the Sanskrit word bhava. Bhava means an entity, and dak, Chen, is how they translated the Sanskrit's term emako, atmako, which means self. Um, Literally, a belief in a self. Um, and so basically, what he's referring to in Soso Kiewo, and when he says Ngundak Chen, it's it's individual, ordinary beings who are still cycling in existence, who hold to a real self, a real me, a real mind, real aggregates, real entities, real five skandhas. And so um, that's the audience that Nagarjuna is now addressing. Those of us who are in that precarious position of cyclic existence. Yu means something that exists. Dong mepar means non-existence. Chinchi lok means backward views or mistaken views of existence and non-existence. Um, so one of the mistaken views being referred to is the view that samsara constitutes existence. And this is, I just mentioned, nirvana constitutes non-existence. And so this is the view of those lower schools, right? And so to stop this suffering, I'm in existence and I have to go to non-existence. And so both of those are mistaken concepts that beings are still um, caught up in samsaric and wrong views can hold. Nyepe are faults. By those faults of holding to existence and non-existence and real phenomena and real skandhas and a real me and mine, by all those faults, what comes? Yumo, mental afflictions. I can't remember who said it. I think it might have been Chandakirti um, or Aryadeva, but one of those great pandits said, when there's the thought of I, then arises the thought of mind. Yeah, I think it was Chandakirti. And from that, all the various afflictions arise. So as soon as there's the concept of me, then there's mind. So I'm going to try to make this a little more real from a Western point of view. Think of how you think of your ordinary self for a moment. We think of our bodies usually, right? And then maybe aspects of our mind, our feelings, concepts, other things. So let's just take the body. Where did the body come from? So if you think for a moment, well, I think it had something to do with my parents getting busy way back. And so let's just take that because we all know that's true, right? That at some point our parents got together and the unique substance of the father got together with the unique substance from the mother, and then our bodies started to form. Well, the interesting thing in science is that we know that the DNA from the father and the DNA from the mother have different aspects to them that give rise to unique features in the offspring. So when we're growing up, when we're young, when we're kids, and we meet relatives, oh, your nose looks just like your mother's, or your smile and dimples are just like your father's. Right? And so we get these aspects of our features that are directly, we can tell they're related, they're familial, and they go back to the genetic material of our parents, right? And it's the unique genetic material that gives rise to whether we're an animal or a human in terms of our form, just our form aspect of our skandhas. So there's a question that Zen masters have raised in the past. One of them is, what was your original face before you were born? Right? Which kind of throws you back a little bit. And it's meant to, right? What was your original face before you were born? And it's hard to imagine, really. But in reality, there was no aspect or even hint of an aspect of our current facial features or body that was in that Bardo being between our last life and this life. There was propensities for finding the unique genetic materials of our parents, but none of our features had started to form at that phase. Um, and I know to get to this level, you have to go beyond Western thinking. Because of course, Western thinking, we're raised from the time we're young within either God made you, you have one life to prove yourself to God, or you're going to go to hell. But if you do a good job, you'll go to heaven, right? That's one major viewpoint that our culture teaches children. Then the other major viewpoint as we get older, no, 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 no. No, everything is genetically determined. The fact that you can think and see things is all based on your neurology and your sense.
Now to that warning from the FBI. Oops.
Something about the FBI. Um, all of your ability to cognize is an epiphenomena produced by the neural networks. It emerges out of the neurology and the interaction of your um, neurons firing and so without all that, there's no consciousness. And so when you die, that's the end of you. Your mind no longer will go forward. So those are the two viewpoints that we're raised in. And so here comes Buddhism. And, and Buddha says, what's greater? What's more vast? The waters in the great oceans of the world, or the amount of tears that you've cried over your countless past lifetimes as you've suffered, which is a very different viewpoint than held in the West, right? But that's the Buddhist view. The Buddhist view is that we're a continuum that has no beginning. And because of our primordial ignorance, we've continued to suffer for no good reason. And we're continuing to create the cause of suffering because of that ignorance and the afflictions. And that's what Nagarjuna is pointing out in this verse. So those individual beings, and that's us, unless you're already enlightened and I don't know it, um, because of holding to real entities and a real self, clinging to false views, backwards views like existence and non-existence, because of those faults, Yumong Wang Yurna, we're under the influence of our afflictions. Um, Ignorance, hatred, desire, jealousy, afflicted, doubt, pride, and all the secondary afflictions. Those consume us and determine where we're going to end up and what our quality of life is. Rangi Samke Luvagur. Therefore, the minds of all of us, so killer, Rangi Sem, our minds, their minds, by Luvagur become fooled. So it's like we're confused and stumbling through existence and our minds are befuddled. So last time we went through the next verse, and we did it just briefly, but I wanted to slow down a little bit with it so that we get a sense of it. Because he's unpacking a lot of materials here. Mula Kepa, this is wise people, the wise who understand the real nature of entities. Um, Kepa is wise, Ngua is short for Ngumpo, entities or phenomena. Namgi, by them, by the wise, Ngumpo, those entities, Mitak, they see that they're impermanent. Luotse means they are deceptive phenomena. Luochu, they're deceptive phenomena. Sok means they're hollow, like a shell. Dong means and. Dongpa means they're empty. Dakmepa means they are lacking in any self. Narpa Wen, here again, this could be um, translated as alienated, but more properly it's translated as thoroughly isolated. Shezhou, called thoroughly isolated. Dong means see. Um, so what they see things as thoroughly isolated. Thoroughly isolated from what? They see that everything in cyclic existence and beyond lacks any self-nature. And therefore their minds are thoroughly isolated, if you will, from any notion of self-nature and anything. The Ngua here, Ngumpo, um, um, is talking about these five qualities that come after it. Mitok means they have no permanence, so we can't rely on them. The sok here, which means like a shell, means that they're insubstantial, insignificant, weak, feeble, without real value, not worth accumulating. So, for instance, if you look at people scrambling for wealth and power, those are thoroughly not worthy of our effort. You know, if we have this viewpoint, not only will they not last and will they not produce any meaning to our life, but in trying to accumulate them, we'll just be accumulating negative karma, which will throw us into a bad state. I skipped over this word, lua, deceptive. Um, They're deceptive because they're like illusions. They can't be counted on. Um, so, for instance, hmm, I'll give you a tragic one from the news. We've all been following that terrible murder in New York, um, which is tragic on so many levels. I don't know where to start about it, but if you look at the poor individual who lost his life, a lot of people spend their whole life trying to get to be a CEO. Because if you're a CEO, you have the power, you have the money, you have all the ways and means. Um, but it was deceptive, wasn't it? It looks like security, but it can change in an instance and cheat you. And in fact, it in this case, it destroyed that man's life. And that's how phenomena and samsara are. So the next word, that's three of the features. The fourth one is tompa, empty. Um, the heaps and phenomena are void of any real nature from their own side. I mentioned, for instance, when you look in the mirror and you say, oh, there I am, and you look at your features. Well, those features all came from causes and conditions beyond our control. And so they don't have any real nature from their own side that we can count on. And then the last um, of the five features he mentioned is Dakmepa, having no self. And in that way, they're um, totally isolated from any true existence. Which brings us to Nagarjuna's view. And I mentioned this one briefly, but I didn't have time to unpack it. Um, it's actually in the next two verses.
Oh, can I ask a quick question? I'm
Yeah,
sorry. For
yeah.
the English translation, they used the word addiction. What was that for? Addiction to what?
They again, translators take big liberties on how they translate things. The word that they were translating over here in this verse was pneumo. Pneumo means afflictions. And one of the afflictions, which is correctly, you know, attachment. And if you look at most of Buddha's teachings, he talks about attachment as one of the main problems that keeps us in the round of existence. And so the translator focused in on that one and called it addictions. I find this with translators, they like to be unique in how they translate stuff. Um,
Thank you. I would have never. It's good you have the Tibetan and can read.
it's really why the language is so important. You know, if you take arts class, he not only does that, but he goes back into the Sanskrit that the Tibetan came from, and you can see the problems also that Tibetans faced when they had to translate the Sanskrit. And they found words that accommodated the Sanskrit, but when Westerners just read the Tibetan without knowing the Sanskrit, very often they add to the confusion because they don't understand the original context, and they translate it in a way that is far afield from the intent of the original author. So language is really important, and I'm glad all of you are willing to think about it and study it. It does make the teachings much more clear when you can go into it and see what the original was. I don't have art scholarship, not even a little fraction of it. So I encourage you, if you can, to watch his classes. They're really illuminating. Okay, so here's Nagarjuna's take on it. Neme um, means no support. This is used twice, but with a little different meaning. Here it's talking about no support. Um, Mipa Yumayin means no objective existence. Dawa Me means no root. Ching means and. And here's Nepa Me again. Remember we had Ne Me, and now it's repeating Nepa Me. And in this case, Nepa Me means no abidance. So here it means no support, and here the same word basically means no abidance. And we're going to get into defining these things in a little bit. Marik Yule, Marik is ignorance. Yule, from that cause of ignorance. Shintu Jung means phenomena vividly arise. So I was thinking this the other night. We were watching TV on a big screen, and all of the images vividly arise, right? But if you get out of the movie a little bit and you just take in what's happening, you can realize there's no real existence to the characters or what's being seen on the screen. It's complex light going through all sorts of systems that are being interpreted and then reconstructed so that they'll appear to you in ways that look normal to you, being sorted out by your vision and field, your auditory field and senses, and your neurology, and then the interface between your neurology and your mental factors. It's really very complex. But if you don't think about it, it's very vivid and very compelling, right? And that's how samsara is. It arises very vividly and compellingly to all of us. Um,
Oh, could you find another word for compelling? Like, it, this is very
well,
compelling to for us because we like to grasp, or
well, really, what's being hinted at, not said directly, is that when we see unenlightened beings, when we see the phenomena in cyclic existence, just walking through the street or in our house or wherever we are, we impute inherence to things because they appear so vividly. We're not analyzing our apprehension of the phenomena, but what we're doing in an unconscious way is just imputing that they're really there. There's some inherent nature from the own side of the object and of ourselves in our world. And so that's what's being referred to. It seems very real, as if it exists in its own right.
oh, you mean compelling in terms of its existence, not compelling in terms of we want to, because I always feel like we want to grasp in some ways,
That's
just because, you know,
yeah,
when we naturally want to grasp, it's very difficult to stop.
exactly. That's exactly. When that automatic imputation of existence occurs, grasping comes with it, right?
Oh, so
And
the grasping stops if you don't think it's inherently existent.
if we can stop the underlying process of mistakenly imputing true existence to ourselves, our aggregates, and our world, then grasping won't arise.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah, that's nirvana. If we can do that, right? If if we can dwell in wisdom that sees that nothing has any true nature to it, then we can dispel the illusion that things have and their compulsion, our compulsion to have them and own them and or get away from them. Um, so that's what's being gotten to, and he's going to go deeply into that actually. Um, so you're getting it. You're getting Nagarjuna's his stance. So it's through the ignorance that things seem to have a vivid reality from their own side. Um, dok, Dogma means these things that seem like they're real and have existence from their own side. Dogma means that are without beginning, u, middle, da, or end. Um, Number bang means the wise have thoroughly abandoned seeing things as having any self-existent beginning, middle, or end. And so, for instance, I mentioned what happens to us genetically when our continuums out of grasping and imputing self-nature grasp to the body that our parents are forming through their sexual union, right? As we grasp onto that, and then because of just how things work, depending arising, slowly our features start to arise, right? There's no self nature in the beginning part of that. There's no self nature during it, and there's no self nature to its end. Um, all of it is thoroughly free of any self nature. Art gave a great commentary on this last week. He was talking about, he's getting into this subject, and he talked about how our five aggregates of this moment have to perish to produce the current moment of our five aggregates. They have to. They can't coexist. The past aggregates cannot coexist with the present aggregates. They have to perish for the new aggregates to arise. And that's happening moment by moment. But we don't perceive it because we're not perceiving subtle impermanence. We only perceive gross impermanence because subtle impermanence is happening too quickly and it's too subtle. But logically, we can tell that that must be true. Where is the past now? What of the past exists in this moment? None of it, right? We have memories of it, but even those memories are changing all the time, right? And so that's how samsara has always been. It's like a machine that has a life of its own. We mistakenly impute this is mine, I'm making this happen. But who here can control the aging of your body? Not me. Who here controlled the way our bodies formed when we were infants and as we grew? Not me, right? And so in reality, it's these things that have a life of their own that we impute self nature to and we grasp and we identify as me and mine. But there's no me and mine within them.
Could you
So,
talk a bit about what Art said? I'm unable, the perishing of the aggregates. Could you
um,
mention?
for this moment of our aggregates to exist, the previous moment of our aggregates must have ceased.
But that's good news, right? Because then we could change that. I mean, we don't because we don't think that's true, but yeah.
Well, there's a truth to that. Um, in a way, it's neither good news or bad news. It's just how things are. Everything in the world is like that. moment.
But that is the good news. If it weren't that way, we'd never be able to be Buddhists.
Well, yeah, and that's the good news about it is coming. The impermanent nature of it and its changing moment to moment can either be the source of delight or suffering, depending on um, our current situation. For instance, if we're really comfortable with things as they are, then impermanence is frightening. However, if we're in pain, then impermanence is very hopeful. It won't last forever. Um, but it
So
is,
Wilson, I have a kind of comment question. So, um, what you're speaking of is really just a constant cycle of creation, destruction. Um, that we create, right? Correct?
um, hmm, the creation and destruction that's happening constantly is relative. Um, it has no self nature to it, but on a relative level, that's
We
what's
we
happening.
perceive it that way, though, right? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
Um,
which we're
we
not supposed to.
Well, what we're trying to do by listening to Nagarjuna and trying to understand his point is we're trying to free ourselves from the misperceptions of it because that's
Right,
causing
right.
suffering or bondage. Um, and so we're getting closer to the truth when we see subtle impermanence for what it is. That's considered the way into understanding emptiness when you start understanding subtle impermanence. And you can see that kind of your pride of who you are is really a fiction based on things beyond your control.
Well, speaking of that, when I was really little, probably not quite before 3, I remember really, really disliking when some family member said, "Oh, you look like your aunt," or "you da 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 da," or "so and so, you do that." And I used to get really unglued because I thought, no, it's me, not other people. You know what I mean? It was so funny that people thought that kind of comparison was,
Flattering.
yeah. I was like, no, that's not the way it is. But anyway, that was just my kid self that had some kind of wisdom I don't have anymore. But
Well, that kid self, we all go through that phase. And Art mentioned this last time too. You can see it in development. When kids reach about 2 years old, there's a very strong, innately born sense of me and mine, right? And a lot of kids get very obstinate. No, I want it this way. In a very strong sense of territory. That's mine, right? And that is the innate sense of self that's been beginningless, right? And that is really the sense of self that keeps us churning in existence.
yeah, it really was a very strong, rejection of what they were saying. It was like, no, I would get kind of mad, really, and I wasn't somebody who got mad easy. So, but that was the one way they could stomp on my buttons, was to say that I was looked like or acted like or was like or
Well,
anything like that.
you want me to use my therapist hat and make an interpretation? Would that be okay?
Oh yeah, that'd be fine. Yes.
The way I see that, because we all have that part of us, is when people try to control us, it really does trigger a sense of get off. I want to control my own choices. And so my guess is when parents do that and relatives do that, sometimes they're trying to diminish you, and oh, you're really just an epiphenomena of your parents.
Well, I don't know if it's diminished, except, I, I don't even know if they're trying to form you. They're just like comparing something, and they may not be as spot on as it's what they think. It's their projection, not my projection. So I just didn't want any part of it. It was kind of funny anyway. But they
Well,
knew they could upset me by doing it. So sometimes they did just to see me,
just
react.
to torment you. Um, it reminds me of the story of Shariputra when he was wandering and he came to a household and he asked if he could have some food. And the wife led him into the kitchen where her husband was eating a fish. And the household dog was trying to jump up and get the fish, and he smacked it. And he had his baby in his lap. And the man got very wrathful to Shariputra and said, "You beggars, mendicants, you're just grubbing off everybody else's food. You're ridiculous." And Shariputra said, "Well, that baby in your lap is the reincarnation of the man you killed for trying to have sex with your wife. That fish you're eating is the reincarnation of your father who used to fish in the pond out back. And the dog you just slapped is your mother who was reborn because of attachment to this house as a dog. So you think I'm ridiculous, but I think you're ridiculous." And so that's kind of the illusion that samsara has us in. Our enemy of this life was perhaps our best ally in our previous life, and everything's always changing and has no real nature to it, but is driven by karma and causation. And so that's what Nagarjuna is getting at in this verse. Um, and in fact, he says it here in this last line of this verse. Oh, no, no, in the first line of this is really a two-verse thought. Chu Ching means like a plantain, like a water tree. Chu means water and Xing means tree. You see them along the sides. If it's not a plantain, if you've ever been on a boat trip down a little river or creek, you'll see trees where the roots have rotted out, kind of sticking halfway into the water, and they're just insubstantial. If you bump into them, they just crumble, even though they seem like they're substantial. Shintu Ningbo Me means Chuching Shin means like a plantain, like a um, water tree. Ningbo Me means having no essence to them. So phenomena really have no essence. And that's really hard for us, I think. That's what the challenge is. First, to understand the object of negation that that is being refuted, and then to really thoroughly see that it is truly an illusion. And so, under our sense of self, when we really look into the aggregates closely, we'll see that it's nothing but an image. Really, there's nothing there to ourselves. They're a construct, many different causes and conditions, changing all the time, arising, relatively arising, staying, and departing. But there's no essence to those three phases either. And so we're kind of this illusion floating in a stream of illusions with no essence to them. And so he compares it here. Drisa, Drongir, Drawa Te. Drisa means scent eater. The Sanskrit is Gandharva, and it's referring to spirits. Drongir is a town of spirits. And sometimes it's translated as ghost town, but that's not really the image. ghost town. You know, that's like an empty town where nobody's there. Gandharva town is like you go into the town, it looks real, but as you see the people and everything, then they disappear. There's no essence to it. It's totally an illusion. Mumbai, um, Mumbai don't care means a bewildered city. Mumbai is like ignorant, confused, bizarre city. Um, Musepa, um, muse means frightening, horrible, like a bewildered, terrifying city. Droa can mean beings, but it also can mean the world. And in this case, it's talking about the whole world. Yuma Shinto is like an illusion, nar, that's appearing to us. The whole world is like a frightening, bizarre, confused illusion. Do you ever feel that way when you watch the news and you see the chaos and the horror happening all around us? This view really helps because you can get caught up in that and drive yourself nuts. But this is really a view that helps you detach. That's how samsara always has been, continues to be, and will continue to be in the future. And so a real choice in what Nagarjuna is getting at is to either search for nirvana, which is a way where we're no longer compelled by it, and we're free of the craving for it and all the afflictions that come from seeing essence to it. Or beyond that, full enlightenment to help all beings escape the suffering that it causes. So as I said, I glossed this, but I didn't go into the details because there are several terms here that if you pick apart, have meaning. In particular, way up top here, neme, where it says no support, unsupported. That's talking about, like for instance, if you're Sharon was talking about it when her folks would or relatives would say, "Oh, your eyes are like your mother's," or whatever it was, right? Um, those phenomena of our features and how our features developed out of our biology, there's really no self-existent support for how all that develops. Its causes and conditions, but none of all of those are also dependent, right? There's no essence to any part of it along the way. So things have no support that way. And then when it says Mikma Yumayin, so that's like a real perceived existence. They don't have any real perceived existence to them. So that gets into our dhatus. Buddha taught we have 18 dhatus, 12 ayatanas, 5 heaps, all those things, right? He's getting into here, Nagarjuna is refuting those things. So let's look at the dhatus, real conceived appearances, if you will. But let's just take eyesight. for eyesight to occur right now, you're looking at a computer screen or something else if you're distracted from this, right? For that to occur, you have to have a working dakyan, which is the sense basis, the sense faculty of an eye, a working eye faculty. You have to have an object that appears to it. And sciences have studied how things appear based on reflections of light that then come in through the pupil of the eye and then go through the rods and cones and get interpreted by the nervous system, right? So you have to have those two factors. And then you have to have the eye consciousness, the ability of the eye faculty interacting with the mind to produce the conscious awareness of a sight, like the shape and colors of your computer screen. So all of those things appear vividly, but the imputation that they have existent from their own side is an imputation. That's a fiction. And so that's what's being refuted by this phrase here, where it says mikpa, which is an objective objective existence, mayan, there is not. There's no inherently existent computer screen here. It's in a relative way, but it has no existence from its own side. Everything about it is totally dependent. And that's true of all the fields of our senses, from our eye faculty to our ears, hearing, nose, smell, taste, tongue, body faculty of sensation, and our mind faculty as well. So things are unsupported, they have no objective existence. And then the next technical term, sawame, they are without a root. So, so that gets into the ayatanas, the sense generators. So this is saying they have no inherent sources. So when we talk about ayatanas, ayatana really means generators, sense generators. When you're trying to go to sleep at night and there's a cricket in your room, you cannot turn off your sense generators generating the sound of the cricket, even though you may want to. Maybe put the pillow over your head or try to get the sound away. But the nature of those generators is when the ear faculty is coming together with the sound consciousness, they're going to generate the awareness. I'm sorry, when the ear faculty comes together with the sound of the cricket, together they can't help but generate the awareness of the cricket in your room. Right? So those are the sources of that awareness of sound.
But how come some people can ignore it? Like some people can meditate and just ignore cricket sounds. Is that because they don't see them as inherently existent, or?
That has to do with the nature of how the six consciousnesses work. We have the 12 ayatanas, which are shape and form with eye faculty, producing eye consciousness, right? The two ayatanas there are objects that have shape and color, and then the eye faculty. When those come together, there's eye consciousness. Then the two faculties of the ear are sound and the ear faculty. And the smell, it's a scent, and the nose faculty. Then with taste, it's some kind of taste, something that has taste to it, and our tongue faculty. And then with um, rekja, with tangible sensation, it's some kind of um, external object with our body faculty, right? And then this 11th and 12th ayatanas are our mind consciousness and the immediately preceding condition. So this moment of our mind consciousness, what is its immediately preceding condition? That can be any kind of awareness. It could be a sensory awareness. It could be an internal thought. It could be an internal sensation, right? Whatever the immediately preceding mental event is, produces this moment of mind consciousness. So when somebody's meditating, um, only one thing at a time appears to our mind consciousness. It can be a sensory input, like some kind of sight or sound or smell or taste or touch, or it could be, as I say, a thought or an image or an internal sensation. So when somebody is absorbed one pointedly in meditation, the definition of meditation is it must be a mind object. And so what happens is when people get absorbed, they're moving away from focusing on their sensory input. If the mind is thoroughly engaged in its object, let's say it's an image of the Buddha that's being contemplated in the mind, and the mind gets one pointedly absorbed in that image of the Buddha, then other interrupting things like a sound or smell or something like that will not disrupt that one pointed concentration.
Because we're single threaded, is that the idea?
Single pointed, yeah. If somebody's trying to meditate on an image of the Buddha and they do hear a sound and their mind goes away from the image of the Buddha to the sound, then they lost that meditation for that moment.
I mean, we're single, we're like a computer, we can only do one thing at a time. Is that what you mean?
Multitasking is a fiction,
Right?
really,
Because
really.
if we had to have left the Buddha image to go to the other
Yeah,
thing.
right.
So no.
Yeah. Each moment of mine has like 60 to 260 sub moments of it. It's Sarah Rinpoche compared it to if you put 60 sheets of paper together and you shoot a bullet through them, it seems like the bullet pierces them all at once. But in reality, it has to go through each page at a time. And similarly, the flow of our consciousness goes through moments, one at a time, even though they're so brief we can't perceive them.
Sorry to go on, but does that person hear the sound who's meditating and they just don't go to it? Like they don't,
The
or,
sound does not make its way to their mind consciousness because
oh, so it hits their ear consciousness, but not to their mind
it hits their ear faculty,
or air faculty.
but their mind is one pointedly focused
Oh.
on the image of the Buddha, and so they're not focused on it, so it doesn't register.
Oh, it just doesn't register. Okay. So they wouldn't have heard it. I mean, if they came out of the meditation, they would say, no, I didn't hear, the gun blast or whatever.
Yeah,
Okay. Sorry to go
somebody
on. Yes.
somebody like a fully enlightened Buddha can
Well,
be total absorption on emptiness, and at the same time, seeing all relative phenomena with accuracy, but knowing that they have no substance to them.
no, I meant some ninny nun in Canarsie trying to meditate. So thank you.
For the likes of us, yeah, it's like when you're focused one pointedly, and that's why there are the stories like one group of practitioners were with their teacher, and they were preparing breakfast for him. And he said, I'm just going to meditate a little bit before we eat. And he went into absorption. And when he came out of absorption, the food was all rotten, and his disciples were haggard, and they were looking at him. And apparently it had been days he was absorbed. And so the time for a meal had long passed, but they didn't dare eat because he had told them to wait until he had finished his meditation. So those kinds of incidents are examples of that, where that can happen. All right, so things are rootless in that there are no inherent sources to the perceptions. If you look in, for instance, to a sound, it has no inherent nature to it. That's the old question. If a tree falls in the woods and there's no one there to hear it, is it really sound, right? Um, and then the ear faculty has no inherent nature to it as well. Many causes and conditions create the faculty. And then the fourth attribute here that he talks about, nepa me, no abiding, no abiding. So they don't abide, they don't persist. And therefore, if you look again at samsara, it's like a ghost, like a phantom town. It's like a horrible, confused city. And beings are, you see it in the news every night. People are killing each other over this and that, or exploiting each other, or it's a terrible, suffering, ongoing tragedy that's like an illusion. So that's Nagarjuna's take on it. So all of this is supposed to produce in us the wish to be free of it. I didn't make very much headway, did I? I'm not
Sorry
gonna,
if my questions slowed you
I,
down.
I think your questions are wonderful. But we're not going to get to Yogacara today. I did find, by the way, the three terms that stumped me when Pende Rinpoche was teaching here on the Song of the Four Mindfulnesses. So I will go over those when we get to the Yogacarya view, but we're not going to get there today. All right, so I will do the next one, the next verse, verse 28. Tsang, tsang sok jikten ilani. All right, so Tsang is Brahma. In Indian thought, Brahma is like the go-to for who has the right view of the world and what the world is. Sok means so forth, such great deities and figures that people usually defer to for the truth. Jikandila, to this world, they said, Demba, um, Dempa Rabtu Kangnawa, um, there's truth to whatever vividly appears. Um, Dini, all right, so let me just, this vividly appearing world is true, is basically what that's saying. And so if you read any other religion than Buddhism, they'll say God created the world is really here, and such proclamations are seen as authoritative, right? And so God created the world, so of course the world is true and it's here. Dine, this point of view, if you compare it to I can find my place. Bakla Zumshe. This truth of the world, according to the Aryas, the Arhats and Aryas, Zoom, they say it's a lie. So some authorities are saying this world is true, whether it's created or whatever. And the Arhats are all saying, no, this world's a lie. Sum means they say that. D, from that, Shenta Chishi, let me see the Sixi Lu. So what is left other than that? So the Buddha said there's only one truth, and that's nirvana. Everything else is a lie. Any other spiritual tradition is going to tell you there's something else that is true. And it's only really Buddha that said, nah, things are selfless. Only nirvana is true. So that's what Nagarjuna is saying here. He's asserting the truth of the Buddha's words. And there's a similar teaching. We talked about it last time. The Buddha had what he called the four seals. All conditioned things are impermanent. 2, all impure things are the nature of suffering. 3, all dharmas are devoid of self. And 4, only nirvana is peace. So that's the teaching of the Buddha. And that's what Nagarjuna is asserting. So I'll stop here. Sorry we didn't make more headway. But this is pithy material. So
But it's good to unwrap. I mean, instead of just,
instead of glossing it,
well, yeah.
I'm glad you agree. If I put you to sleep, I'm sorry, but if you like it,
You
I
never put us to sleep.
I love this stuff. It's very liberating, and it never ceases to go deeper the more I study it. So
And we get the vibe that you love it, so that helps us too. So I think it gives us blessings. So thank you very much for loving it so much.
Sashi Boogie Zuchi Medota, Riralin in the Gambadi, Sangi Chindu Mid, Uagi, Dogo Nanda, Shinga Chubasho, Idanguru Rana Mandala Gamne Dayami, Gewadi, Gewo Kon, Sunam Yeches, Ozo Chin, Sunam Yeche Legend, where Dabo Guni, Dobarsho. Janju Zenju Rinpoche, Amage Banange Geji, Geba Nyamba Meba Yang, Gone Gondu Bewa Sho. Gari Rawe Goe, Chingande, Bendande, Malu Juwene, Genrezi Wanden, Zengazo Yi, Chebe Sidi, Badu, Dengyo, Chi.
Thank you so much, Wilson.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Wilson. Be well.
Is this going to be our last class before the new year? I guess so.
We'll have to wait till the new year.
Happy New Year, everyone.
You too. I was hoping we were going to get to the verse where Nagarjuna finally talks about why it's so important to wait to this material until you've done all the other material that Buddha taught. But we'll get to that next time, why it's important to have a good basis before you go too deep into this. Meanwhile, I hope you guys have great holidays, and
Yep, you too.
Thank you so much, Wilson.
Take care of yourself, Wilson. Keep
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all.
Yeah, thank you for
Everybody be
teaching.
safe.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Blessings for the new year.
Yay.